Journeys Ahead 2 Lineage Chapter 3 Lifeline. Written and narrated by T.S. ProArt. While crossing through to the other side, Void, Jida, and Povnu were suddenly met with the flying form of a piece of metal heading straight for their heads. Gasping and taking his girls by the arms, the Spark quickly pulled them as well as himself downwards to avoid the chunk that cracked hard against the location station. Whoa! What the? Void gasped out as he and Jida quickly stood back up and locked eyes with a bizarre sight. They had returned to the workshop that had been decorated with all kinds of Christmas material. A glowing tree stood near the back, tinsel was strewn along the walls, while tons of multicolored lights dangled above. Within, they found Kot, Sarv, Tucker, and of course Nock, dealing with one of his more recent yet longly expensive creations. Spinning around with a rotating waist and massive fat arms, contorted a work-in-progress mech suit, Nock's mech suit to be exact. After the Aurora glitch incident, as everyone had come to call it, Nock figured it was time that he helped out during a fight, if something similar were to occur. For years, he acted as Void and Jida's guy in the chair during their vigilante ventures. That thought process led him down the 3-year road in making what he called the Thumper, a large battle mech that he could pilot and fight in. However, the whole project had been a hefty mess for a good while now. "Hey, kid! Little help?" Kot cried as Nock attempted to maneuver past the arms and reach the cockpit. "Damn thing's moving too fast!" Sarv yelled in annoyance as she tried to reach her hand inside the control deck with her Nock-sized feathers. "Oh, by Matira," the Spark muttered in a panicked state before approaching the situation. Brushing everyone aside, Void locked his eyes upon the quickly rotating machine and decided upon when to make his move. Round and round it went, spinning with cylinders that looked to knock anyone out cold with a singular clack. Round and round it continued, before Void made his determined move. Lunging forward and reaching out, the Spark gruffed and caught one of the machine's arms with both hands. Huffing and pushing against the clicking gears and servos within, Void summoned a small surge of his Spark essence and sent a wave of power into the robot, sunlocking it and setting its wiring into a manual short-circuit reset. With a crack, pop, and electrical glitch reversing shift, the mech suit recoiled itself back around and stood in a mandatory position, although now slightly smoking and sparking from its malfunction. "You guys alright?" Void asked as he gazed back down at Nock, who had fallen upon his rear during the skirmish. The little mechanic was wearing a green Christmas-themed sweater, red ear set, dark pants, and brown shoes. Nock was now in his 30s, but still doing his thing. "Yeah, it wasn't spinning like that when Jida left to pick up Povnu. Just... thanks." Nock awkwardly elaborated as Void reached down and took his hand, proceeding to gently hoist him back upon his feet. "Anytime, brother." The Spark ended as Kot came over and began to brush Nock off himself. "You alright?" he asked, leaving Nock to merely nod. Kot, too, was now in his 30s, wearing a brown sweater with a deer on top of it. He also looked ready for the Christmas season. "Thanks for that. How you doing, hun?" Sarv greeted as she brushed herself off. "Haven't seen you since, well, many Mondays." Tucker added as he and his wife approached. Like Nock and Kot, the two were wearing warmer clothes, dark green red striped sweater pants, boots. It was the same old, same old. It was really cold in Aurora, so they all did their best to stay warm. "Yep, helping Jida pretty much 24/7, and busy with the home project," the Spark replied as his wife slowly approached to his side. "Thanks again for letting me take these few months off of work. It means the world." Void continued, leaving Sarv to nod her head. "Sugar, you're more of a family member than an employee at the bakery. Take all the time you need." The massive Thorn expressed, leaving Void to gracefully nod his head. Whoo-wee! Say, is anyone getting hungry? I can make us some hot dogs and hot cocoa. Tucker then blurted before looking down the Void and Jida and then Nock and Cott. Hot dogs. Anyone? He asked again. Thanks, Tuck. But I'm really in need of a nap. The little one's been... Well, you'll understand when you start to have kids. Jida said as she gently yawned and rested against her spark. I should probably take her up to bed. Maybe some other time, Tuck. Void affirmed in a small voice while lifting his metal hand up, leaving Tucker to return it in a fist bump. Once impact was made, they both made an explosion motion that led to the two wives laughing. I could go for some hot dogs! I'm hungry! Pofnu boasted while grabbing her stomach's love handles. Hungry! She replied, making everyone laugh. Taking Jida by her hand, the spark began to make his way towards the nearby flight of stairs that would take them to the upper floor. As they reached its first step, Void carefully maneuvered and scooped his wife up and carried her within his large, bulky arms. Whoa, Void! Are you sure you can... Before Jida could finish, the spark smiled and rolled his eyes before ascending forwards upon the steps. I can manage a lot of weight, love. You know this. You're but a feather. Void reminded as he carefully made his way up the stairs. Besides, you're already carrying a lot. Let me do this. Jida didn't know what to say. All she could do was smile and just lean her head against Void's chest that sparked and bloomed with blue energy from within. Okay, you big softy. She returned, leaving Void to quietly chuckle. Entering to their shared room, Void maneuvered forwards towards his sleeping quarters, and then began to rest Jida upon his bed. Alright, love. Here we are. Laying Jida down with tender care, both her and the spark smiled at each other with a tiny thank you, leaving her lips in response. Alright, I'll be home later tonight. I gotta get back and help Jed out with... In the middle of his reasoning, Jida reached out her hand and gripped it upon the sparks, proceeding to then speak aloud and cut off his words. No. She said with her ever-present contagious smile. Stay here. Sighing with a blushing roll in his eyes, Void tried to shrug off Jida and tried to reason with her. Freckles, as much as I would love to, I have to get back. He's gonna be really upset if I don't. With another tug and grunt, Jida pulled the spark closer before speaking again. No, stay. Shaking his head with his own smile, Void knelt down to be eye level with his wife before reasoning again. Jida, I really need to go, hun. Jed's seriously gonna be wondering what's taking me so long. Furrowing her gaze and pulling Void in close, Jida took his other hand in hers before speaking a final time, letting the spark know that there would be no arguing with this one. He can wait a little bit longer. Come here. I want to snuggle. With one last tug, Void found himself being pulled into the bed. Jida's arms wrapped around his body as he was lovingly held close to her form, as well as the little ones. Sighing with a happily defeated tone, Void let out a quiet, fine, before wrapping his arms around her in return. But when I get up, I need to get back to helping him. Our dream home won't be done with one set of hands, you know. Nodding with a sleepy and groggy gesture, Jida quickly fell asleep with her face in Void's chest. All the spark could do was continue to smile and stroke Jida's hair. Maybe a short nap would be good, he thought. Although he had been happier than ever, the spark couldn't deny that he also felt a weight of stress. For the first time in years, a spark, or something similar, was going to be born into the world. The first one since... Looking over his shoulder, Void set his eyes upon their bedside desk and eyed down the lotus cube. that rested in between his family photo and Jaida's. After defeating the monster, Void had tried to destroy the little remnant of what he had been, but found it to be practically indestructible. Since then, he held on to it, choosing to keep it safe with him as opposed to keeping it somewhere else. The Spark was still unsure about the cube's purpose. If he was being honest, he didn't know if Lotus was still alive in there, or if it was just a corpse. He didn't know, and frankly, he didn't want to know. So, it stays with him, to be better safe than sorry. Look away, why don't you? The Spark mumbled before taking the cube and turning it around. He then turned himself back to both Jaida and his child, and simply nuzzled himself into them. Let yourself rest, Void told himself. Let yourself sleep, was all he could say, before the gentle grasp of darkness carried him into the lands of slumber. However, it wasn't long until something began to stir within the Spark. It was a deep feeling, one that made him ever so slightly turn and grumble in his sleep. His heart then began to beat rapidly out of nowhere. The energy that buzzed beneath his biomechanical skin began to rise in energy. Most of all, a sense of familiarity. Was he dreaming? Remembering? Void couldn't tell within his own head. He was asleep. Or was he awake? What was this feeling? It felt nice and eerie all the same. It was only when he tried to rationalize it, before something took him out of his weird limbo-like state. Something that awoke him to life. Shooting upright to the sound of a violent boom and flash from the window, Void and Jaida scrambled awake with wide and startled eyes, whilst feeling the sensation of the workshop shaking. It felt as though a bomb had gone off nearby. For all they knew, it could have been. What was that? Jaida shouted in shock while reaching down to her stomach. I don't know. Knock? Void asked aloud as he quickly got out of the bed and stood to his feet. Pofnu! Zarv, Tuck! The Spark continued to spit as his body stopped vibrating for the moment. Hey! You guys feel that too? The short mechanic yelled up to the married pair as the sounds of several footsteps began to run up the stairs. Are y'all alright? What the hell was that? Zarv loudly chimed in as everyone from downstairs ran to Void and Jaida's room faster than ever before. Mom! Dad! Pavnu cried while regrouping with her adopted parents. That wasn't you guys? Jaida wordily asked as she slowly stood and used Void as a support. What? No! You guys didn't see the flash from outside? Kat asked as he and a few of the others turned towards the window within the duo's bedroom, then falling silent in shock. Upon seeing this shift in expression, Void raised one of his eyebrows and then set his sights towards the glass behind him, falling into a sudden shock as well. Whoa. He spoke in low tones as something caught his eye from the outside. What is it, Blue? Inquired Jaida as the Spark began to approach the window, taking notice of something bright within the sky. Everyone was now focused upon the large piece of glass. What they saw could only be described as some kind of anomaly. Within the skies above Aurora was the unmistakable form of some kind of swirling light source. It glinted off gentle hazes of both oranges and purples, both sparkling and enticing with a mystic haze. For Void, the best way to describe it was as though a four-pointed star had been liquefied, its edges all swirling through one continuous ray of light that created an almost milky spiral for all to see. Slowly turning around, Void met the sights of everyone within the room, and it appeared that they all shared the same thought, that being the simple phrase, "Not again." Everyone, to the roof! We need to get a better look at this thing! Exclaimed the Spark as he quickly walked past the others and into the upstairs hall. With Jaida following behind, everyone else with concerned looks went right after her in quick tow, all following the Spark, till he reached another small flight of stairs that led to the workshop's rooftop. Ascending a few short steps, Void marched up before a door, took its handle, and pulled it down, revealing to light the winter afternoon. "What is it?" Jada asked again, while following closely behind Void, who was now out and atop the workshop's snow-ridden ceiling. I don't know," he answered back with a baffled sense in his soul. Approaching the ledge, Void squinted his eyes towards the massive vortex within the sky. It appeared to both be calm and gentle in nature. Nothing crazy emanated off its form. No lightning strikes, no frost beasts, mystical birds, or even glitches were to be seen. Just a gentle formation of light that the spark felt to almost be drawn towards. "Please don't be glitched. I ain't ready to deal with those savages again," Tucker prayed out as he scratched the back of his balding head. "It's quite pretty and terrifying now that I look at it," Cod added while Paulfnu approached and stood firm beside her caretakers. As everyone continued to look upon the anomaly above, Jada quietly glanced a look to her husband, only to see something unexpected. His once dim, swirly veins were now looking to emanate that same color within the sky, a soft mixture of both blues and slight purples and oranges. Even his eyes began to reflect the same hues. However, he didn't seem to notice it. "Blue?" Jada asked, while Void ever so gently took a step forwards. "He's glowing different colors. Have we ever seen him do that before? Is that normal?" Cod asked in a whisper, while leaning down the knock, who nodded with a tad bit of uncertainty. "We know he normally does that when he's powering up or if he's mad. This is different," the small mechanic quietly explained back. As Void continued to stare upon the vortex, the sounds and world around him felt as though the silence. Jada's words came as muffled noises, as Void's vision then began to blur at the corners of his peripherals. Wincing, he slowly raised his hand forward, fingers outstretched and reaching out to the large swirl. It felt too familiar for comfort, like the smell of his mother's famous dish. Void felt nothing but nostalgia towards the essence that radiated off its form. Like it was beckoning him to fly into it. "What are you?" he quietly asked, before all hell broke loose. With a sudden pulse and energy, the swirl above erupted with another bang of light, accompanied as well by a second deafening boom. To coincide with all of this, everyone's worst fears came to light. Something large and towering crossed through to their side of reality. It was a massive skyscraper-sized spacecraft, one that looked to be alien in aesthetic and shape. This craft was absurdly massive and hovered in an upright position. A lengthy, almost conish shape made up the upper form of this Goliath, until segmenting down the four large tubes. These apartment-sized rubber hoses connected to a lower middle base that buzzed with an orange glow that looked almost like fire. Underneath this gargantuan middle segment was one last set of pieces that spiraled downwards to create an almost stinger needle-like shape, glowing with a hot and smoking yellow source of power. Hovering around the craft also spun three giant rotating rings, each one of which burning with that same orange with high electrical velocity. To accompany this powerful surge, the craft was plastered in gunmetal grays and small pulsating cracks of purple and blue hazes. Electricity both sparked and buzzed across its form as well, looking to be causing mass amounts of damage in the process. "Holy crap!" Jada gasped out as those on the roof stood back in shock at what they were seeing. None of them had bare witness to anything like it before. A machine of flight so massive yet terrifyingly spectacular. The city of Aurora began to react as well. Some people shouted in fright from below, while cars started screeching to a halt. Chaos was about to arise. "Void?" Jada asked as the spark stared on in awe towards the large craft. He, like the others, was shocked by its sudden appearance, but still, that feeling persisted in his soul, begging to get closer, to know more. The technology on its form even looked familiar. Without warning, an electrical explosion came forth. The left side of the ship erupting with a devastating influx of energy. Metal parts and flames flew into the air, some pieces sparking with electricity and others looking to get violently torn away from Aurora's reality through lightning striking rifts. Then another eruption occurred on the right-hand side, popping one of the large tubes and spraying forth a sea of parts and fire. Coming out came several sources of power, a bright green, a white, and a pink power source of some kind that were violently ripped away into some kind of teleportation. With another flash, a purple bolt of energy bursted out of the ship and suddenly launched right over everyone's heads, all up to a crash in the woods behind the city. Leaning forward, it was now obvious that the craft was coming down. Smoke trailed off its form as more of its mass began to break apart in small segments. Another eruption of energy exploded once again, this time releasing a red, blue, orange, yellow, and gray source of light that were swiftly ripped to different areas, like the green one. The craft was now heading into a nosedive, falling at a violent velocity that released an almost ear-deafening wail of screaming engines. It's coming down! Oh, Jesus, it's coming down! Nock shouted in utter horror as the ship neared closer and closer to the surface, almost looking to crash right into the workshop itself. Snapping out of his trance, Void quickly turned to his left-hand side and threw out his hand, deploying his battle helmet over Jaida's face. "Huddle and cover your ears!" He then shouted to everyone as that familiar blue energy surge began to arise within his horns. Doing as the spark did so, Nock and the others hunkered down while Void threw his right arm out and brought forth his battle axe. Gripping its handle tightly, Void sent a surge of his spark essence into its rounded metallic form. Once the axe was ignited into its burning blue hue, Void raised it up and slammed its end hard into the roof of the workshop. From its crescent blade sparked forth a blue force field that surrounded the spark, his family, and the shop itself. "Brace yourselves!" Void then called as he pulled both Jaida and Pathnu close, feeling and sensing the massive craft barrel right over him and everyone else's heads. Opening their eyes, Void and the rest still found themselves to be alive and atop a still-standing workshop. Lots of smoke now descended and covered the city, as well as a slight downfall of debris. Gently getting back to his feet and helping Jaida and Pathnu up as well, Void turned to the rest, seeing that they were also alright and without a scratch. Was it aliens? A government miscalculation? Nobody really knew for certain, but the fact remained that something large crashed a ways off, now visibly smoking many miles into the deep wilderness behind Aurora. First glitches, now a frickin' spacecraft! What's next? Nock shouted in shock as he brushed himself off while the force field of Void's axe retracted back into his build. What is that? Tucker questioned aloud as he helped Sarv to her feet and stared on at the massive crash a ways off within the trees. Some kind of space needle or something like that. Kot chimed in as everyone made their way to the other side of the roof, staring on at the large ship that looked to now be a blurry but smoking shape from afar. "That thing is massive!" exclaimed Sarv, who coughed and waved smoke away from her face. It could be dangerous. Friendly? If it had passengers, if it does, Void, what do you make of this? Jaida asked as she gazed upon the spark, who was still noticeably curious to the craft. His veins had now stopped glowing, for the portal sealed above, but Jaida knew that something was up. Void's next few words only confirmed it. I gotta go check it out. You guys stay here. Whirling their heads, everyone locked eyes with the spark with surprise, up until Nock spoke out in disapproval. "Not alone, you're not," he boasted, placing his hands upon his hips. "Yeah, you crazy? We're coming with you if you plan to do something stupid like that," Sarv added, leaving the spark to wince. He knew everyone around him could hold their own, but the prospect of getting them into possible danger so irked Void in a weird way. That sense of losing loved ones was still a real anxiety for him. Even after all his time, even after stopping Lotus, he couldn't shake it. All of us. Jida then finished, wrapping her hand around the sparks in a tight hold. Perking up with shock to this, Void whirled his head towards his wife and gazed upon her with disapproval. What? No! You're any day from being due. If whatever it is that crashed down poses a threat, I will not allow you to tag along. Expressed the spark, leaving Jida to bite the inside of her cheek. My powers have doubled in the last couple of years, Blue. I can defend myself. If push comes to shove, I can... Well, a few warps shouldn't hurt the little one. Jida reasoned, rubbing her stomach once more. You can barely walk up the stairs! Void wordly groaned in a whisper, while Jida reached her left hand up and caressed the side of his cheek. Listen, I love that you're worried about my safety, but I need to make sure they have a father in their life. Jida retorted, patting her belly and leaving Void the grimace and an unhappy expression. Jida, please, he pleaded, only to be denied once again. We're going. All of us. She finished, gazing at the crew. Mysterious holiday alien visit? Well, that sounds just about fancy. Cott chuckled out with a laid-back look to his attitude. Well, I'm down. Let me grab some essentials, exclaimed Tucker as he quickly made his way downstairs. Right behind you, love, joined Sarv as she too descended downwards. Guys! Void weakly called, but everyone was already making their moves. There was no arguing. They had all made their decision. Blue, if we all go together, we'll be stronger. You're not on your own anymore, and you don't need to venture forth to danger acting as though you are. Jida added, leaving the spark to quietly hold his tongue and think. Shortly after, Void felt a small kiss upon his cheek that calmed his nerves for the time being. It always did as such. Okay. Just stay close. Please. Void asked, almost having the same attitude he had when Jida first joined him those few years back. Both him, her, as well as Pofnu then turned towards the smoking ship in the distance, still curious as to what or who they could possibly find. Arriving upon the shoreline next to their unfinished cabin, Void, Jida, Pofnu, Nock, and Kot all stepped out of the canoe that somehow managed to hold their combined weight. As they stepped upon the snowy shores, Sarv landed from above with Tucker clasped in her talons. She had carried the big guy all the way there and landed the both of them with a tired grunt. It didn't help that he had also brought with him an overly large survival pack. The forest now looked to be doused within clouds of fog and drizzling snow, which in truth were the downpouring leftovers of smoke that were left behind from the ship's fall. Deploying his battle helmet to breathe and see better, Void turned and gestured for Jida to do the same. Nodding with a flick of her wrist, she summoned a ray of her cosmic energy to conceal her face, along with giving Pofnu, Nock, Sarv, and Tucker similar glowing transparent face masks. Kot, however, didn't need as such, for he didn't breathe with his upside-down, water-concealed head. Master Novason, welcome back, the words of Jet called out as he trudged his way in from the smoke. Jet, you alright? Void asked as he approached and then brushed a bunch of snow off his creation. Yes, splendid even. However, may I ask what came down from the sky? It gave me quite the startle, inquired the computer-headed robot with a slight tilt in his head. That's what we're trying to figure out ourselves. Knowing Aurora's law enforcement policies, their reaction time will be a bit slower than I'd like to admit. So I wanted, or I guess we wanted, to see what was up. Void explained with a concerned set of words, before turning his head towards a large gust of billowing smoke that seemed rather close to where the cabin was being built. You think you could tag along? Asks Void, in which making Jet nod and cross his arms. Of course. Walking up alongside her husband, Jida turned to face the rising smoke from afar, and then held out her hand with a gentle curl in her fingers. Watching on, everyone witnessed Jida's palm gently glow a faint orange hue, looking to draw in small amounts of smoke as well as ambers from above. All up till she closed said palm and turned back to the others. Crash site is about 5 miles upstream, she stated, leaving Void the nod, but started the question. Wait, what did you just do, hun? Smiling with a shrug, Jida turned and began marching her way towards the tree line with an almost snippy-sounding response. Last year I discovered I could sense the heat length of where distant fires are. Thought it was useless, but hey, pretty convenient, right? Shaking his head with a small little laugh, Void got alongside Jida, with the both of them now leading the group forth into the unknown. For a good while, they all ventured through the thick trees and slightly snowy terrain. The wildlife in the area had fallen silent due to the sudden intrusion of the craft's downfall, leaving nothing but the distant sounds of water and crunching snow to fill the soundless space left in their absence. As they continued on, Void occasionally found himself glancing at Jida. She moved at a slower, more steady pace now, in complete contrast to how she usually was before the pregnancy. She seemed tired, but focused and determined to accompany him and the others. As much as Void hated her being out there in her current state, he couldn't deny that she was always both strong and caring in almost every aspect. He admired that about her. Even when carrying an infant, she refused to back down. It made the spark a nervous wreck, but he couldn't deny the woman what she saw as fit. I've always wanted to meet aliens, Tucker began, trying to make conversation, making a few of the others turn their heads in response. First off, we're already talking with one, and 2, we don't know if it's aliens, Tuck. Could really be anything. Saw of reason with her husband, as Nock, Jet, and Cot joined in the conversation. Yeah, I mean, who thought a giant cube monster would be a thing? I didn't. Began the mechanic, causing a whole conversation to begin from behind. Jada, however, wanted to discuss another thing that had been bugging her, what she saw back on the roof. Void, what was about the vortex that got you all entranced? Your body seemed to react to it. She had brought up, while Pofnu trotted forwards between her and the spark, looking determined and sniffing the air. I don't know, Freckles, replied Void as he kicked a small stone across the snow-covered ground. It felt like seeing an old friend for the first time in years. It was like it was both something similar, yet looked different all the same. It was both nostalgic and unnerving. Turning back to look upon his fiery-haired companion, Void watched as the gears inside Jida's head began to both click and spin with thought. What do you mean by nostalgic? She asked. Looking back forward, Void took in a long breath, knowing full well what he meant. However, the prospect of letting his imagination run wild to possibly give him a false sense of hope was something he didn't want to dwell upon. But he had to speak his mind. He knew better not to bottle things up. It was like something I felt back when I was younger, before everything fell apart. The energy that Rift gave off, it was eerily similar to the energy in Salva. Before the spark could finish his trail of speech, both him and Jida stopped in a clearing that Pofnu stood within, bearing witness to a massive heap of destruction laying waste before themselves. Chunks of metal along with a large empty crater lay rested around mangled and broken formations. Trees slightly burned with purple flames. The snow and grass lay thrown about, while everything else in the immediate area had a subtle warmth to it. Hold that thought, Void asked Jida, while now approaching the massive imprint within the ground. By this point, everyone else had come across the site, all curious as to what they could find. Purple fire? Cod asked with a cross in his arms. Must have been one of those colorful pieces that whizzed over our noggins, Tucker theorized as he hobbled over a chunk of twisted bent metal. The purple one? Nock inquired. Well, duh, what else was purple? Quickly returned Sarv. If that's the case, then where's it at? Jaya then questioned as Void knelt down to some torn metal, looking to glow a dim orange hue. Reaching his hands out, the spark began to knock some parts aside, after noticing a larger slab wedged within the snow. I'm assuming it just blew up upon impact, Cod suggested, scratching his forehead as though it were his chin. No. If that giant ball of fire blew up, it would set this whole area ablaze, Pavnu said while beginning to examine the ground and then descend further into the crater. And it sort of smells like, she whispered to herself before looking over her shoulder and eyeing Void with a stunned stare. That's a fair assumption. If that's the case, then... Turning her head from Void and then to the crater itself, Jida found there to be something peculiar about its form. On the left-hand side were claw marks, ascending the torn open dirt. Falling silent and trailing her gaze up the slope, Jida found there to be a line of small holes and large oval indentations, a mixture of what appeared to be unknown footprints scurrying off into the wilderness. Oh God, she mumbled, while Void, oblivious to the whole scene, finally pried the piece of metal out from the snow. Ugh! Jeez, what are you made of? The spark asked, before brushing off and turning a large chunk around. After looking and examining its form for a few long seconds, Void's curious face soon fell to that of shock. Blinking with a now furrowing brow, Void's jaw hung just ever so slightly low as his brain began to piece together what he was seeing. It sent waves of uncertainty and disbelief into his heart, creating a visible shift in expression that everyone wordily took notice of. Blue? Jida asked as all eyes fell upon him. Without saying a word, Void continued to stare at the piece of metal with a shaken-eyed expression. His breathing tensed, his arms rattled. Most of all, his eyes were as wide as saucers. Void? Nock asked as Pavnu ascended the crater and looked upon the spark with a shocked face. This is... Raising an eyebrow and slowly marching forwards, Jida gazed upon her husband and then down to the burnt slab of metal in his hands. Something was up. The whole vibe suddenly felt wrong in the worst kind of way. The last time Jida had seen Void this worked up was when he left for Salvaheim. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Void, what is it? Jida inquired as she too took hold of the metal and leaned down to see the other side. There, welded upon it, was a symbol. One that she quickly recognized. Although dented and burnt, it was unmistakable. It was the same symbol that rested upon Void's armored chest. The downward star-crested arrow. The insignia of the Sparks. Jaw dropping as well with widening eyes, Jida slowly craned her gaze up to meet her husband's face. A familiar sense of shock washed over his body as well, knowing full well what this could have possibly meant. Oh my God, she whispered as everyone else approached, curious as to what had shaken the married pair. What's wrong, guys? Jed asked as he rolled up alongside them and gazed down with his smiling head. Jet's fun little face then transformed into an expression. His white-colored eyes and mouth shifted between both blue and orange before settling back to a normal hue with an astonished look. His programming immediately took notice of the insignia and began to decipher what it could truly be. Chet, what is this? Void asked in a state of complete disbelief, as everyone else watched from a distance, unsure if they should approach. Amidst this, Nock found himself looking at the smoky forest around himself, being both delighted and slightly concerned about its form, until something moved out of the corner of his eye. Rolling his head, the mechanic caught a glimpse of something maneuvering out of the way. The smoke swirled, and a branch crunched loudly, leaving the mechanic to gasp in slight fright. Guys? He asked, as everyone else turned to see. My creator, from my calculations and thought process, this metallic slab was forged only 3 or 4 Earth cycles around the sun, a little over 3 years old. Jet explained as Pofnu, Jida, and Void craned their eyes upon him. The crest isn't old. This is fresh. And there's only one race out there that would go the great lengths in smelting it alight. Jet finished, while strictly eyeing Void down with a baffled stare. Are you suggesting that... Void couldn't even finish his sentence. All he could do was look back down to the crest that glinted off the slight winter glow. There then came a loud snap and pop from the trees. Then a grumble and a moan. Something was no longer hiding. It had made its presence known. But what? Is that a moose? Sarv asked, looking to reach for a firearm she had brought with her at the side. Could be a bear. Tucker added, as he reached into his large backpack and pulled out his utility knife. A bear? Nock asked, as he went to reach for his firearm, but found that he had left it back at the workshop. Oh. As Void, Pofnu, Jida, and Jet got ready to discuss some more, they began to hear the sounds too, getting louder and louder, more frequent as something massive began to circle the area. Looking around themselves, the 4 quickly went back to back and carefully examined the lands with their eyes and ears. Pofnu then went on the defense. Her tails arched with a pinkish-red energy as an audible snarl escaped her maws. Jet, activate protocol protection. Guard Jida by all means necessary. Whispered the Spark as he slowly deployed 2 of his blue Nova blades from his hands. Of course, sir. The robot replied as 2 shoulder turrets emerged from his back, along with a pair of orange glowing metal blades emerging out of his hands. Looking over her shoulder, Jida seemed to say something as her hair grew to ever so slightly burn. Yet, before a word could leave her mouth, the sound of silence suddenly arose into that of an ear-deafening roar. Bursting from the trees and smoke came forth a wintry white, purple-spined glowing beast with a pair of long arms and 4 galloping spider-like legs. The blurry shape of a monster screeched with a deafening cry as it opened its maws wide that clamp upon Void, Jida, Pofnu, and Jet. Quickly moving, Void turned and pushed both Jida and Pofnu out of the way and into Jet's arms, leaving only for him to take the full crunching blow of the monster. The beast didn't even give time for anyone to scream to its sudden emergence, for with one quick clamp, the Spark found himself stuck within its glowing blue crystallized maws and carried forward into the thicket of woods at an alarming speed. To this, everyone shouted in utter horror as they watched the almost 20-foot albino monster carry the Spark away into the trees. Quickly rolling back over upon her feet, Pofnu gasped loudly and then began to sprint headstrong after the beast, while the others awkwardly scrambled to follow. Dad! She cried. Snapping its jaws up and down, the alien-looking monster attempted to puncture and seep its fangs into the Spark's biomechanical form, but repeatedly found itself being shocked back by its Spark essence that acted as a body defense. The surges of energy were akin to how a skunk would use its spray, or how a jungle frog uses its poison to ward off predators. It was now a natural reaction that the Spark gave off to these kinds of situations. Grunting with an annoyed snarl, Void raised his 2 arm blades back and forcefully stabbed them into the snout of the monster, which appeared to have a large purple-crested horn upon its front. 4 beady purple eyes upon its left side widened in pain as the crystallized, fleshy white beast swayed its head from side to side, now attempting to swing the spark off. Advancing in from behind with a red trail of energized light leaving behind her tails, came Pofnu, who now relied on her mystical abilities to just keep up with the creature. With a surge of red light, the spectral fox sent a wave of energy into her lower paws, and used it to leap forward at an impressive length. Dropping in from above, she opened her maws and clamped down hard upon the monster's saggy neck, causing the beast to stumble upon its side, then trip down a steep hillside. This alien-looking creature then bellowed a roar as it let go of Void, now sending the three crashing hard down upon rocks and snowy-filled dirt. Amidst their fall, Void reached out and caught what was essentially his daughter, before she could spiral out of control. Downwards they went, rolling and smashing against the rough terrain of frosted nature, all before entering a ravine that held a small ankle-deep river stream. At last, the three of them all splashed down and rolled upon rocks and clams. Void took the blunt of the fall for Pofnu, while the beast cried out in an anguished screech from afar. As water doused and seeped across the spark's back, he gazed up at the fox, who shook her head with a little grunt. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked with a panicked breath. "Yeah, thanks, kiddo," Void said through a retracting helmet with a relieved breath, whilst Pofnu nodded in a thankful gesture. Whirling their heads back to the beast, Void and Pofnu quickly scrambled back up and stood side by side, now eyeing down the four-legged monstrosity as it too stood to its full height. A dim purple light pulsated like a heartbeat beneath its flesh, signifying that it was surging with some sort of energy. And as for what, Void and Pofnu didn't know. All they knew for certain was that they had a fight on their hands. A very nasty fight. With a powerful, earth-shattering pounce, the large beast smashed its claws into the creek with an accompanied roar. The vibrations from its call shook both Void and Pofnu internally, and spiked their souls to be on the defense. "Pofnu, remember how we trained!" Void commanded out, while bringing forth his battle axe. The albino monster, with its jaws open wide, ran towards the two of them while swinging its arms forwards and backwards, looking like a linebacker charging at max speed. As it neared, Void dove to his left and Pofnu to her right, avoiding its devastating smash of fists upon the now splashing up half-frozen water. Quickly turning around with a slash, Void delivered a deep burning cut into the back knee of the beast, causing it to stumble for only a moment. Upon the right, Pofnu pounced forward and clamped her jaws into the monster's abdomen. With a snarl, she promptly ripped a good chunk of its flesh up with a flipping pullback, and landed back upon the stream. Howling in rage, the beast's spines and horns began to burn a bright purple white, coursing with a lavender source of power. As its spikes fully bloomed with light, the energy housed in their forms quickly descended down through the monster's back and into its arms and then into its knuckles. Now whirling around towards Void and smashing its fists down, the spark instantly flipped out of the way as a sharp crystal shot of water blew out, having been summoned from the creature's strange aura attack. As the spark rolled back upright through the air, he swung his axe with a turn and sliced a clean cut through the lower chin of the monster. Landing back to his feet, Void maneuvered backwards just a tad, allowing for the monster to release another screech into the air. "Pofnu, clear out!" commanded the spark, as he gripped his axe with both hands and summoned a sharp surge of energy into its handle. Quickly sprinting to the shoreline, Pofnu watched as Void raised his axe up, then slammed its burning edge into the water. The entire stream looked to suddenly ignite with light, as powerful surges of spark-induced electricity coursed through its liquid form. Once it reached the monster, the beast was instantly engulfed within a web of bright and dark blue bolts. Howling again, it smashed itself down into the water, beginning to pulsate with its purple rays of energy once again. From its smallest spine to its largest, Void watched in dismay as it grew to glow brighter and brighter, whilst its eyes and interior of its mouth shimmered to emanate the light as well, ignoring the burning electricity going into its skin. The monster unhinged its jaws and summoned something that made Void lose his focus. Appearing from in front of its snout with a purple haze, appeared a large, purple Nova Rune. What? Void quietly gasped out before suddenly being blindsided by a burning beam that shot out of the rune's center. Gasping and reacting in the nick of time, Void summoned forth his regular blue-shaded Nova Rune to counter the blast and defend himself. However, he suddenly found the beginning trapped in the beam's lock. Now being pushed back by the powerful force, Void felt his heart beating and racing with an unimaginable amount of thuds. What was going on? The Spark asked himself. This couldn't be possible. His drawn feelings, the insignia, and now this? A beast, using the magic only he and his people knew? He had never seen anything like the creature in Salvaheim. He had never seen a ship that large either. Something was up. Something he had to get to the bottom of. Using his free arm, Void contorted it into an upgraded blaster and sent forwards a set of tiny rockets at the monster, exploding both its legs and chest into a spray of purple matter upon impact. This attack caused the beast to lose its focus and seize its strange, taboo-looking Nova Beam, allowing for Pavnu to then run back in and strike upon its neck. With her teeth sinking into its jugular, Pavnu pulled back once again and took a massive chunk of flesh with her mouth. This final attack alone seemed to finish the job, for the beast, after a few short spurts and cries of pain, slowly crumbled upon its back and smashed hard into the shallow water, going limp and lifeless. Good work, Pavnu. Void wheezed out as his fluffy daughter ran back up and slid to a stop at his side. Slowly focusing his gaze back forwards, Void locked his eyes upon the monster, or whatever it was. That rune it emanated. Void couldn't shake it. He couldn't shake any of this. It almost felt like a fever dream. All of it felt off, uncanny and not right in a sense. Were these the actual doings of Sparks? Could Moore truly have been alive? No, that was impossible, Void told himself. It couldn't be. This had to be something else. Something different. He couldn't accept that possibility. It was impossible. Void! Pavnu! Jaida's words cried out from behind with a series of wet, foot-falling splashes. Turning, the Spark and Fox were quickly embraced by his beloved, who then pressed her forehead against the Sparks. Are you two okay? She asked, as Jet and the others emerged from the smoke with panting breaths. Void didn't know what to say. He was both in a state of shock and deep thought. Everything he thought he knew seemed to almost fall into jeopardy. He needed answers, and was going to find them. Amidst this trail of thought, Void just nodded his head with a shaken posture, just relieved that the beast hadn't taken a bite out of her or anyone else. All whirling their heads, Void and the others bear witness to the creature slowly standing back up to its feet, raising its arms up and then slamming them back down. Everyone watched as its burnt, cut body began to suddenly heal over at a rapid pace. Its skin returned to normal, while its wounds reformed to its natural state, like nothing had been dealt to it to begin with. God damn! Tucker cried as he raised a knife. Standing firm with astonished fear, Void deployed his blades, Jaida her fire, and Jet his arsenal. Pulling out a pair of pistols, Sarv aimed towards the creature's head, while Nock and Kot hid behind Pavnu's now glowing, snarling body. Cracking itself back into an upright position, the monster sounded to cackle with a devilish smile, before slowly beginning to march its way forward. What the hell? Void called out in shock as the beast got ready to attack. It healed like a spark. What was happening, he thought, when suddenly, from out of the smoke behind the beast, came something that halted the monster in its tracks. What looked to be a large, glowing and orange energy blade connected to a chain, shot out of the clouded haze and stabbed through the monster's waist. Then another one appeared, shooting out from the smoke as a glowing dagger, wrapping around the monster's arms. Then another and another, This time around, its long neck and legs all igniting to light with a powerful orange glow. Grunting and then howling, the monster attempted to fight back against these restraints, while more and more of these strange forms of energy emerged from the smoke-filled distance. Then, with one hard yank and pull, the beast was smashed to the ground and slowly dragged backwards into the blurry scene. It clawed and screamed in anguish, trying to fight back against its elusive captor, but ultimately failed and soon disappeared into the ash and smoke. It continued to roar for a moment, until there was a bright haze of purple light that flashed for only a moment. Its screams and cries then ceased, leaving nothing but the eerie sound of river water to splash on by.